Hello and welcome to In the Mix, the podcast all about the Great British Bake Off. My name is Greer and I'm here with JP.
Hello.
And we're going to talk about all things free from this week. We've had a few sort of weeks like Vegan Week in the past, but I think an entirely free from week. I'm not sure if we've had one of those before. Do you think it was a good week to do?
Yeah, I thought it was quite a clever one. I think, free from stuff is now incredibly popular. It's everywhere. It's got its whole aisle in the supermarket, so why not do a week about it? And actually, it proved to be a good one to watch.
Exactly. I thought it was really good and interesting because they did a vegan challenge, a gluten-free challenge and a dairy-free challenge. So there's a bit of everything, I think, in there. And it's been something we've talked about quite a lot on the podcast because obviously we started off the series with Freya and she was doing entirely vegan baking. So she missed her moment to shine in this week, really. They could have done it earlier for Freya.
I know. I did feel for every time we had a bake, I was like, Freya would have done well with that one. Oh, God. But yeah, there was a lot of social media flack after it was announced. But, I imagine that they have the order before the series starts. So I'm sure they didn't go, we'll wait until Freya's gone and then we'll do a week with a vegan challenge in it. But she would have done well.
She would have done well. And talking of social media, it's funny, isn't it? Because people just put out the randomest of opinions. I don't know if people even have a second's thought before they click the tweet button, because some of the stuff I saw coming out as soon as the Bake Off episode aired yesterday, I was like, really? They just can't do anything right. I expected the people who, love meat and are meat eaters and sort of, they don't really understand why veganism is getting a platform and all of that. You expect people to be like, ew, vegan sausage roll, I'd never eat that, and, that sort of thing. But then you had people that were like, oh, it's really good you're doing a free from week, but why haven't you made it free from sugar as well? And why haven't you done this? And it's like, really? Like, there's 3 different challenges. If you take the sugar out, what are they going to be making?
Exactly. Next year, we're just going to have the free from bake off. Every week is going to be free from. We're going to have every single dietary requirement under the sun.
I know, exactly. And you're right, it is a dietary requirement because lots of people, they were complaining and stuff and, going, oh, why haven't you got this? Why haven't you got that? Or I wouldn't eat that. Well, yes, maybe you wouldn't eat that or maybe you haven't tried that because the only reason you probably have up until it's sort of become a bit more popular to eat with free from products is if you're gluten-free or if you're dairy-free for a sort of a medical reason. That's the only reason that you would have had it. But now people sort of tend to eat from the free-from aisle and stuff because actually sometimes it tastes just as good or even better. And it might be, for some people, a healthier choice. So I thought it was an interesting week to do.
It is the typical thing where people will just find something to complain about on social media. But I liked the idea of this week. And as you say, more and more people, I've tried going gluten-free for a while. And, it's interesting to see the sort of stuff you get out there. It's a lot more than it used to be. And I think, shows like Bake Off really should be leading the way and saying, actually, there are lots of different options. There's always that thing about vegetarians who get the same option at every single restaurant because there's only, one vegetarian dish. And now you have restaurants that have like half of their menu is vegan. It's great. We should be celebrating it.
Exactly. I agree. I think, now things are even better, aren't they? Vegetarian stuff at one point or free from stuff you're thinking, oh, it's going to taste like cardboard or no. But now there's so much stuff. We've learned so much stuff over the last few weeks watching Freya anyway about what you can include in a bake. So I'm all for it. We love a controversial challenge in the Bake Off, in the mix, really. We always think, is this really a baking challenge? And the first one this week in the signature, I wasn't really sure if it was a proper baking challenge. It was 8 identical dairy-free ice cream sandwiches, and they did stipulate we had to have them sandwiched between 2 baked biscuits. And Prue even said in the little bit beforehand, it is a baking challenge after all. And I thought, well, they know that this isn't a baking thing. Did you think it was ridiculous?
I had exactly the same thought. And do you know what I love about this year is that they are finally getting to the point where they're sort of taking the mick out of themselves. So we had the Twix thing last week where Matt was like, oh yes, it's a Twix, but we can't call it a Twix. And this week it's, we'll have an ice cream sandwich, but we have put a biscuit in there because it is a baking show. A token little bit of baking. But I did think that and I was like, I don't know. I've sort of got to the point now where I'm like, do you know what? We're in series 12. They're running out of ideas. Sometimes they're going to have to break it up a little bit. Yeah. But yes, those biscuits were so important.
They were.
Or macarons in some people's case.
Oh yes, or not, I guess. We'll talk about Jürgen's interesting fall from grace a little bit later on. But the idea of an ice cream sandwich anyway, I'm not really on board with it. I don't think I'd really want to bite into my ice cream. You know, that's something that people say, you know, people who bite into ice cream are usually sort of the weird friend. That's what people are usually talking about. So I wouldn't say I'm a big fan of an ice cream sandwich, but some of them made some really good flavour combinations. And I always like talking about that because, as you know, I like to sit there and daydream me eating some of the food that they are baking. Yeah, there we go with that in the background. To imagine what it tastes like. And we get really frustrated when we can't imagine, especially in German week. It's still a frustration for me. I didn't get the full experience.
You are still very bitter about that, aren't you?
I am a little bit bitter about German week. A little bit bitter. I want to be able to try them all. I hope at some point we'll get some sort of hookup between, you know, the bake-off itself, and maybe they can send us some samples. They wouldn't do that. Yes. But that's the dream. Come on.
That'd be amazing.
The dream.
Come on.
I know. So that people were using, because obviously you can use milk for the ice cream because it was a dairy-free challenge, people were using some interesting replacements. There was coconut milk, cashew milk and oat milk. But Giuseppe, he used soy milk, but also tofu, which was not something I actually thought that you'd have in a dessert form.
Yeah, I was really confused about his. And it was the thing, as soon as the challenge started, I thought, okay, I have never tried dairy-free ice cream. I've had things like sorbets, but that's not really ice cream.
Yeah.
So I did wonder how they're going to do it. I wondered if it was the case of, as you say, putting things like oat milk in or cashew milk, or they had the sort of cans of coconut cream, which for me, I thought that would be the best because that's really creamy anyway. Yeah. You know, it's a really nice texture. So when he then put tofu in, I was like, I don't really understand what you're trying to achieve here. And I wondered if it was like the texture thing almost, because ice cream, I don't know, when you freeze, I imagine when you freeze milk, it's a bit like a sort of mini milk, sort of ice lolly, because it's quite watery. Yeah. So I wondered if he did that for texture, but I was really, really confused about that. I was like, what's he doing? Exactly.
What's Jürgen doing? Giuseppe had his staple flavours in there as well. He always comes up with oranges. You know, he's very oranges and lemons. That's his thing. So he did ginger and maple syrup cookies, which sounded very nice, with an orange ice cream. Which seems quite normal, you know, normal. But then we get to some other people, and we get to Christelle. She did cashew milk, a coffee ice cream, and she did tahini and miso cookies. Now, she said she was doing a miso and tahini frappuccino biscuit, but they sort of dumbed it down a bit, I guess, for the narration. But she's gone back to miso again. Giuseppe with his oranges, Christelle with her signature miso.
I know. I'm starting to wonder if she is on commission, if she's sponsoring a miso charity. I just don't know. I've never seen in the sort of 12 seasons of Bake Off, we've never had a baker who's just used the same ingredient, shoehorned it in every single week. I mean, where's Japanese week when you need it for Christelle? Seriously, she would shine.
I know, she would. I like the idea that she's sort of profiting on using miso every week from like big miso, like Big Pharma. I like that. It's that, and we've Black Forest Gatto everywhere. Again. I'm bored of hearing about Black Forest Gatto. I'm not interested anymore. But that comes up again later too. So, yeah, Christelle, miso sounded interesting when we were both sort of going, oh yeah, I'd like to try miso caramel and stuff. But now on the third time you've used it, we're a bit like, come on.
I'm bored.
Change the tune now.
Maybe we should have had a free from cliche or free from repetitive bake challenge.
Exactly.
You can do nothing you've done. No miso, no Black Forest, and Giuseppe, put the oranges down, please.
Exactly. That would have been good. Someone who really doesn't play by the book, and actually you can never guess what she's going to do.
I know where this is going.
It's our favourite. It's good old Lizzie. Yeah.
Yay!
She created a vanilla and almond brittle praline with dark chocolate biscuits. And they were very dark chocolate, weren't they? They were like 100% cocoa or something, she said.
Yeah, that was brilliant. The moment when Noel sort of comes over to her and goes, how much, is it cocoa? She's like, 100%. Like, it just, literally.
Nothing else in there?
You could, nothing else. You wouldn't be able to tell if the biscuits were burnt because they were black anyway. And but I like the idea that she sort of rolled the design into the top. It didn't quite come out, but I like the idea that she went for something a bit more decorative. And again, this week she wanted bakes that were not free from finesse. She was hoping.
She's been hoping for finesse for weeks now, so much so that it's been tattooed on her ankle for her Great British Bake Off commemorative tattoo that she had got. And just so finesse she's been looking for, but I thought the 100% cocoa. See, I wanted to say 70% because that's the sort of, the high-end dark chocolate you hear about. So 100%, I can't even imagine it. And you're right, it did come out completely black. It was sort of akin to Noel Fielding's personality.
It was quite hilarious.
Hers sort of reminded me a bit of an Oreo, and sometimes Oreos are a bit hit and miss. It depends which ones you get. The normal ones, everyone, raved about them a few years ago, I guess now, when Oreos started to become a thing, on the internet. Oh, everyone is obsessed with American biscuits. But they're not like biscuits that we get here at all. And when I first had them, I was disappointed because I was like, this just tastes like a burnt biscuit more than anything.
Yes.
I know.
Yeah, they're so bitter. And then you have to get like the double stuff ones to get the right proportions.
Yeah.
Because you need more of the cream in the middle. So I suppose, for her, I can't remember what flavour she did for her ice cream. What was it again?
Vanilla and almond brittle. And she said
I
was...
suppose that would have counteracted in a way.
It balanced it. I guess it would have balanced it. But the reason that she said she did this flavour is because she takes her dog Prue, I assume... named after Prue Leith, out on a walk. And at the end of the walk, the best part of the walk is when they go past the Mr. Whippy ice cream van and they get a vanilla ice cream for her and the dog. The dog gets an ice cream.
Yeah, I mean, spoilt dog right here.
I know.
But I love that. And I love the stories that Lizzie has with her bakes, actually. It was good. It was good. So... it's interesting, isn't it? Because Chigs and Lizzie and Christelle, they were actually allowed to shine a little bit more, or they were actually, in the forefront a bit more than the other episodes, because both Giuseppe and Jürgen, they didn't have the best of weeks this week, especially Jürgen. No. There was a point where you were watching and you sent me a message going, oh my God, is Jürgen going to go out? And I thought, he might do. It's not going well. I know, it was the thing. I always watch slightly later because I like to fast forward through the adverts. Huge advocate for that. Sorry, advertisers. But so I always start about 20, 25 minutes into the episode. And every single week, I always text you after like the second bake going, I know it's already over and you already know, but oh my God, I think this person might be going home. And this week it was Jürgen. Literally after the second one, I was like, oh, he's going home. But it's interesting because we've sort of hit this weird part in the series that again we've never had, and we had this for Caramel Week, that nobody in Caramel Week had 3 great bakes, and that never really happens. There's always at least one person who it's easy who's going to be star baker, and that sort of happened again this week. And I don't know, we've never had that from a bunch in the final 5. I mean, we've got quarter finalists, and some of them, they all just sort of fell under the radar at least one part in the episode.
They did. I was so surprised that Jürgen, something was going wrong. And even with the baked part in his signature challenge, it wasn't the ice cream. So he was making macarons with ground pistachio and almond. And I like the sound of his ice cream, banana and coconut ice cream, with the coconut cream and the coconut milk, like we were saying earlier. That sounded like a good one. Banana ice cream is my favourite. I know that makes me a bit weird. I know. See that?
No, it's good. No, I like that. No.
Okay. So that is my favourite. So I was pleased with that. But Jürgen kind of didn't do well with his macarons, which is a normal baking thing. I mean, we've never baked them. Well, I've never baked them. I spoke on your behalf. I guess you've never baked them.
I'm always getting macarons out the oven, always. No, well, I'm allergic to them because they're meringue, so I can't even eat them. No. But you're right, they are a staple of Bake Off, of any cookbook or baking show. So you just think, for him not to pull that out of the bag was really uncharacteristic for him. And even when he was piping them on, I sat there and was like, they look a bit lumpy. Like, they just didn't look right from the off. And I was worried because you and I have both said over the last couple of episodes that we feel quite confident with who the final 4 are going to be.
Yeah.
And so I think anyone apart from who we thought was going to be going this week, who sort of dipped under the radar, we were going to be like, are we about to have the shock that we tend to get at least once in every series, which we haven't really had this year. So yeah, it was danger zone. Yeah,
it was. I was very confused because, he had to cool down his meringue, and that was the problem. I guess it was probably hot in there. He didn't have enough time to cool down the meringue, so he just piped it anyway. And Paul noticed when they came around to judge, he was like, that's what's happened. But it's interesting because they didn't say, oh, Jürgen, look, it's not right, it's not good, I'm disappointed. Yeah. They were like, oh, maybe you've made a new type of dessert, maybe it'll be nice. And I'm like, they're being very kind to him, whereas anyone else would have been like, this isn't good at all, you've screwed it up. But Jürgen, it was like, oh, maybe you've created something new. So maybe Jürgen gets quite angry and they didn't want to upset him.
Well, I did wonder.
Yeah.
It was very out of character. And, we had in the preview from the episode before, the preview for this episode, that Paul turns around to one of the bakers and goes, this isn't your best. And was quite brutal. And I thought, when they were really nice to Jürgen about something that he had messed up, let's be honest here, I was like, what? Like, it didn't make sense to me. And, obviously it tasted great. And that's always a good thing about Bake Off, that it doesn't go right if it tastes good. Great, you still got half marks. But I was surprised that they were so positive about that one when structurally it didn't quite happen.
No, macarons are meant to be airy and sort of crisp, but they were completely flat. And he said they weren't even sticking to his ice cream. So he was very shaken up, I think, by the signature challenge, Jürgen, which is very out of character. Let's move on to the technical this week, because it's the one that's caused the most stir, because vegan sausage rolls, they've been talked about for years now, ever since Greggs bit the bullet and released a vegan sausage roll and everyone went mad, and it was excellent advertising for Greggs. They had to do a vegan sausage roll with rough puff pastry. We've been waiting for a rough puff and we've got it. Yes, I know.
We've got vegan rough puff pastry. I never knew that was even possible.
No, I still don't even know how that's possible, but they seem to do it. And inside, instead of the sausage, it was mushroom and walnut, the filling, and they had to come up with, yet again, an accompaniment, which no one cares about, a caramelised red onion chutney, which was a waste of time.
I know. No, I went to said fast food institution on Tuesday and got myself a vegan sausage roll just because I was in town, and I thought, you know what? I was so sure it was going to be vegan sausage rolls, and I'm so glad that I went for the punt on that on the show last week, because I knew it. But I wouldn't have that, and I wasn't, walking around Kingston going, oh, if only I had a little bit of red onion chutney to dip this into. That was lovely. No.
No one has ever thought that.
Stop the dip. You had an ice cream sandwich in the first challenge, which was barely a bake, and now you're worrying about a dip. Come on.
I know. And they do sort of try it a bit. I saw them try it, but after the first try, you don't hear any more about anyone's caramelised red onion chutney, because that's not what it's about. Why waste some of the time making this? They had to do the tzatziki the other week as well. Why? Yeah. Just stop. So I hope the producers listen to In the Mix, and they'll know that we're not interested in having a dip with the technical next year, or a butter. We're not interested.
Oh yes, if you could do that with some garlic butter, or really put the cat amongst the pigeons and wind everybody up on social media, and have Prue and Paul come out and go, do you know what, guys? There's a big twist this week. We're not even looking at the sausage rolls. It's all about the dip. Or use it as a tiebreaker. Just make it interesting.
Tiebreaker would be good. Yeah, I like that idea.
These three are pretty good. So we're going down to the dip.
Yeah.
That'd be fun.
That would be fun. It was a good challenge, and I'm glad that you said that you would eat a vegan sausage roll, and you've had one this week, because I would. I actually enjoy looking at all the different options they've got now in the supermarkets for vegetarian sausage rolls, because they're really nice. So I sat there and I was like, I would eat that. That would be really good. I would eat the chutney, but, just because it's there. I'm very fickle with my opinions, aren't I? But I was pleased with the vegan sausage roll idea, and you did predict it. Lots of people, as standard, were going, ew, that's disgusting, on Twitter and stuff. And I'm like, broaden your horizons, open your mind, go try a mushroom sausage roll. You will like it.
Yes, exactly. And I can guarantee that some of those people would have tried some sort of mushroom pate at a restaurant as a start. Something like that. They would have had something with mushrooms in before. Calm yourself down, guys. It's the future.
Yeah, mushrooms are very hated food, though. I think that's one of the main things people really dislike. It's usually the texture, because people think it's kind of slimy and, a bit soft. People don't really like it. But I can see why it's often used as a meat substitute. It has that same sort of flavour profile. Does that make sense? It sort of tastes the same. Yeah.
Yeah, they do. It's got that sort of, it's that umami. We love that word.
That's the
usually
one.
associated with miso. Where was Christelle's miso in
Not
this
again. I know. God. But the thing that I sort of struggled with the sausage rolls, I make sausage rolls and I'm very, I can actually say I make one of the things. Not vegan or probably my own pastry, but I have made a sausage roll before. And I was surprised because everyone's didn't look very neat. They all looked a little bit misshapen, especially when they were putting the filling in. Everyone was like, I'm not going to measure it. I'm just going to whack it in. And it all looked a bit odd.
It was a strange one. And I think, when you think about a sausage roll, you always think about the fact that usually the ends are open. You have the scores down there. They look quite classic. Sausage rolls look like sausage rolls. So to have such a wide range was strange. I love Giuseppe's, let's be honest here, pasties.
Yeah.
With a good bit of crimping around the outside and a massive bit at the end. It was just, it was really strange to have like 5 different types of vegan sausage rolls. And I thought that Giuseppe's looked quite neat, actually. Was it Giuseppe? Yeah, it was Giuseppe's ones that look quite neat with the scoring down them.
Yeah.
And then when you look at them properly and realise they look like a pasty, you're like, oh yeah, he's not quite done that well, has he? It was really like higgledy-piggledy and not uniform at all. In fact, some of the bakers didn't even have 8 that looked the same as each other.
Yeah, exactly. They're always about making things identical, aren't they? Especially with the ice cream sandwiches, and then in the technical, everything's got to look perfect and the same. So I was surprised when people couldn't really get what the sausage roll looked like, to be honest. When I make them, I'm a big fan of pastry, so if I can shove as much puff pastry on my sausage roll as much as I want, that would be the best. It's just overload it. So I tend to not leave the ends open. I put it round, but I don't make it like a pasty. It's still very much rolled up. I think because they were sort of folding it over the side, weren't they? And then had to sort of, I guess, crimp along that way. It did stray into pasty territory a little bit. It did.
I think it was the dip wasting time. They just didn't have the time to think.
It was the dip. They've got to caramelise those onions, only for Paul and Prue to eat like one strand of onion and be like, yes, it's nice. But they're not judging on that. So no. Very bitter. But we did have one of the best moments in the technical, and I think half the nation cried and half the nation sat there smirking like, oh, I'm kind of glad this happened. Jürgen tried to remove the tray from the oven and something went terribly wrong and his sausage rolls ended up in a pile on the floor.
I know. We have been waiting for the drama this year, and it was one of those moments. And you said, I genuinely think I heard about 9 million people going, to then cheer or cry afterwards. I was gutted for him, particularly after that first bake where he sort of had a bit of a mare as well, despite the fact the judges didn't think so.
Yeah.
I was like, oh no. And then came the horrible thought, and I totally have to admit this, because I saw on social media that someone was like, oh great, Jürgen's sausage roll comes with a caramelised onion dip and some human hair.
Yeah.
To which my first thought was, well, that then makes it not vegan.
Oh.
And I was like, that's now not a vegan
products.
sausage roll. Yeah.
Oh my
God.
God.
I'm so sorry, Jürgen, you failed. This is now not vegan.
He didn't follow the brief. That's excellent. I don't want to know what's on the floor in there because they're in the middle of a big garden. So they've all walked in, mud on their shoes. You don't know what's come in, dead fly, something like that. Everything down there. But people were saying 5-second rule, Jürgen, quick, pick it up. But he kind of stood there absolutely shocked and embarrassed that it was actually filmed. And it was Jürgen. That I just couldn't believe he had had a nightmare. Something was going wrong with Jürgen. It never happened. So part of me was like, oh, there's drama. It's exciting. And then also because it was Jürgen, I was a bit like, oh, yes, we've actually seen something.
He's human.
He is.
He's not Jürgen the robot. He is actually human. Proof.
The vegan sausage rolls were his nemesis. I know.
Bless him.
And then in the rankings, Jürgen didn't do very well at all. We had Christelle at the bottom, mainly because she had too much spice in there and it completely blew Paul and Prue's heads off, and she even tried it. And then Jürgen, 4th. I think that's the lowest he's been in a technical.
I know, even when there were sort of 12 people in there, he didn't even come 4th normally. So that is, just having a quick flick through. Yeah, what made me laugh as well is the fact that Christelle had the spice issue, and that was because of the dip. It was like she failed on the dip. I was like, what's going on? Jürgen was 6th in the very first week. he's had a 5th. But apart from that, he's always been top 3.
Exactly. So it was very unheard of. They obviously didn't like the additives from the flooring, the little bits of fluff from the carpet that were added into his vegan sausage rolls.
Bit of texture.
Exactly. Lizzie was 3rd, Giuseppe was 2nd, and then Chigs got the number 1 spot. And Chigs is starting. We've said this, when he got Star Baker the other time. He's so quiet, and then he does these amazing bakes and gets Star Baker, and you think, oh my God, where has Chigs been all this time?
I know. He's the dark horse of the competition. I mean, he's got a big following on social media. There was a lot of comments about his glasses.
There was.
In recent episodes, they like a bit of the old eyewear. But I know.
That works well for you, yeah.
But for him just to come back, and you're right, he's quite... Well, no, he's not up and down. He's consistently good. He's consistently top half, I would say. But yeah, he just has these moments where he really comes out and he's brilliant. And I can't remember what he had Star Baker before. Yeah, he's Star Baker for desserts back on episode 4. So, I sort of didn't expect him to do amazingly well this week. But I suppose, particularly on Freeform week where none of them really do it, it was anyone's game. It was sort of a leveler this week, which I quite liked.
It was, and it brought the sort of the 2 top dogs down, so it gave Chigs, the chance to actually be back up there in the number 1 position. And he did incredibly well, and I think he said his brother might be gluten-free, I think, or vegan or something. So maybe when he's been learning in lockdown, he's been creating a free-from bake. I think it was gluten-free. So maybe he's had a little bit of practice, but probably not with the vegan sausage rolls. So it was well done from Chigs there in the technical.
Yeah.
It was good. This is where the competition heats up. In the Showstopper Challenge this week, no one did a bad bake. Everyone's was so impressive. I was sat there like, how on earth are they going to choose? I think I messaged you being like, I don't know who's going to go. I've got absolutely no idea. They had to create gluten-free celebration cakes, and they had to be visually stunning and 2 tiers at the least, and they had 4 hours. I mean, what did you think of everyone's bakes?
Do you know what? I mean, a little bit of a spoiler alert here, but the fact that I think for the first time in the series, in the show's history, they admitted at the end that the person who went home, it had to be decided on who was the better baker overall, and they had to take other episodes into consideration, because this week was just... I wouldn't have been able to send any of them home. No. I really wouldn't have done. And those showstoppers were great, and we'll mention it in a few minutes, but the person who went home this week, for me, did a brilliant showstopper. And it just, it was incredibly hard. When you take the whole episode together, I honestly couldn't separate them.
No.
I couldn't have separated them and sent someone home.
Absolutely not. They all looked visually stunning. They fulfilled the brief there. I was like, if that was my birthday cake or something, or even a wedding cake, you'd be so pleased with any of them. They were all amazing. So let's start off with Chigs. He created a red velvet cake, and I don't think anyone thinking back has done a red velvet cake this season, so it was nice to see something a little bit different. And he had an ornate chocolate collar going round, so he did, his decoration was with chocolate, so it was quite delicate to do. I thought that was really clever, showed a skill, showed that he was quite a professional baker rather than just a lockdown baker. And he had strawberry jam, chocolate and vanilla cream cheese frosting. I thought his looked really, really good. And it did prove that he isn't just someone that had baked banana bread in lockdown. He's really picked up the skills.
Yeah, he's trying hard with that one. And I think that when you have got a challenge which you don't need to do chocolate for, to be brave enough to do a chocolate collar, I think was really, really good for him. If I didn't have to do chocolate, I would not do so in that test. It never seems to go well, ever. They always
especially with the heat
weekends. Always. So when he was like, I'm going to do a chocolate collar today, I was like, are you insane? Like, why would you do that to yourself? But he pulled it off and it looked amazing.
It really did. And someone else that went with the chocolate theme too, over the top but extravagant. That's what he does in these showstopper challenges now, especially with last week's 170 step method or whatever it was. Jürgen, he's fighting for his place still after the first two terrible challenges he's had previously. But he did a chocolate cake for his wife, who apparently is a big fan of chocolate, and he did the standard dark, white and milk chocolate, but he did 3 sponges and 3 different types of icing, and there was a chocolate ganache drip, and it had all these different chocolate buttercream. And I mean, it was simple in the way that it was all just 100% chocolate, not in the way of Lizzie's 100% chocolate, but it was all chocolate. Yeah, it was all chocolate, but it looked incredible. It was one of the best chocolate cakes I think I have ever seen.
It was really striking. I love the fact, he went for the stripes. He kept the idea of it very simple. He went for the sort of drip around the outside. I will admit, I thought it looked a little bit wonky. And I did think it was, again, I was sort of surprised because, when he brought it up to the front, and we all do this as people watching at home.
Yeah.
When they bring them up, you're like, oh, they're going to say this, they're going to say that. And I'm sitting there going, they're going to say that it's wonky, and it didn't look as perfectly straight up as they would normally pick up on. And a little bit like his signature, they didn't really, the first thing Pearce said was, oh, it looks lovely. And you're just like, but, I love the idea of it. I think it did look visually stunning. And I like the fact that you combine the 3 flavours, the cakes inside look nice. He did do a very good job.
Yeah, I thought it was good. I think I've got a bit of bias because I also love chocolate so much, especially, when you get the Cadbury's bars and stuff now, they started doing the dark and white chocolate mixed together. And I'm like, yes, you get me with that. With the mixture of all 3 types of chocolate, I'm, that's the cake I'm going to choose. I just thought it looked so good. I just think the contrast of the different colours of the chocolate made it look incredible. And you're right, I guess it was a bit wonky, but I guess there was a lot of buttercream and everything sliding around and bits. So I was very impressed by it. And someone who I was impressed by as well, and especially their icing work, is Christelle. And she came with such a lovely story about one of her grandparents again. And she obviously has a big family and has a big family connection, especially with her grandparents, because each week she does a lovely sort of tribute to them, which I think is really, really nice. And she did her grandma's cascading wedding dress that she'd bought for her sister's wedding, and it was coconut and jaggery creme pat, coconut and walnut and cardamom sponges, and it just flowed really nicely. You could see the train of the dress coming down in a cascade, as she described it, and it was all like little roses piped, which I thought was very clever. It
looked amazing. And again, I think she completely nailed the brief with this one. Again, I love the story behind it. What I like about Christelle's stories is that it is family stuff, but it's not a sob story. She's just telling you what's inspired her, and she wants to share that. And I love that. The idea of the cascading dress, I've not seen something like that before, and I thought that was genius. But she's been quite good with that. I mean, I think it was her who did the I'm going to double check actually, back in Biscuit Week, because it springs to mind. She's the one who did the sort of the vanity table with the mirror and the pull out drawer with the makeup in and everything. She's very good at coming up with these visual ideas and making them look really good. So for her, I thought it was such a good idea, and she executed it really, really well. Really well.
Exactly. And I thought it was interesting because we've spoken about Jürgen a few times, especially, I think, as you say, back in Biscuit Week when he made that windmill. And we all said it was quite classic. His designs have been kind of classic and sort of standard. And his designs for this were chocolate, and, there was buttercream and it was piped, but it was chocolate. Whereas you've got to, I guess, be careful. You've got to take the risk if you're going to use colour. And Christelle used lovely pinks and reds for her grandma's cascading dress. And I just thought, you know what? It actually looks maybe more visually spectacular because it is in colour than perhaps Jürgen's more traditional sort of iced cake. It still looked good, but I think that extra bit of risk was quite good for Christelle there too.
Yeah, she's definitely pushing herself, and it's been so nice to see her confidence sort of develop over the series. It makes me laugh because on social media she puts loads of videos up about how she gets things wrong. She put up a TikTok this week about her 4 sugar domes, and she's very self-depreciating, but she is a great baker. She deserves to be in episode 8. She deserves to be in that final 5. So she really proved herself with that.
Definitely. I think Christelle, she has put a lot of herself out on social media as well and shown her personality. And I just think that she is grabbing the opportunity of being on the Great British Bake Off with both hands. I think she's going to do well even after the show ends. I think we're going to hear a lot from Christelle, really, because she's very funny and her flavours and her detail and decorations, they're both good. So I think we're going to hear a lot more from her.
I hope so.
Me too, definitely. Someone that I hope we hear more from, and I've just been so pleased with this week because she finally got the finesse and she finally did what they've been asking for. Is Lizzie. She created a cake that was so individual for her. Something, Christelle has her family stories, and Lizzie really put her heart and soul into her bake this week. She wanted to represent some of her SEN issues that she has, including dyslexia, concentration difficulties, and also, I think, did she say ADHD? I think so.
Yeah.
My iPad's changed it, so I was like, I think that says ADHD. And I thought it was incredibly clever, but actually she managed to do the icing and everything incredibly well, and it was very neat too. So let's have a look. What did she do? Italian meringue buttercream, pineapple jam, which is actually quite an interesting flavour, I thought. Yeah. And the decoration linked back to her story about ADHD and dyslexia because she had these rice paper sort of sails in different colours, and they all had numbers and letters on to represent her difficulties with dyslexia. And then also the cake itself, the way it was iced was so original. I hadn't really seen icing done like that before. It kind of looked like the cake was furry, and she was saying it represents sort of the brain fuzz that she gets sometimes. And it was incredibly bright colours, just like Lizzie's outfits that you see. I thought it was unbelievably good.
It was brilliant, and I've got to admit, it was one of those, and this happens every now in Bake Off, it was one of those that I suppose, because of my teaching background and the fact that I've worked with children with ADHD, and I don't know, I sort of got the sense that you get a built-in radar when you become a teacher, and you notice these sorts of things. And I've loved Lizzie from the beginning of this series. I think she's such a great personality, and it's been brilliant to have her on the show. And this cake, I almost felt a bit emotional when she sort of presented it at the end, because for me, having worked with children who have got dyslexia and dyscalculia and ADHD and all of these things, to be able to express yourself in a way that she did, and to be able to get that feedback from it, and to be able to tackle something that she's been working for 8 episodes to be able to, put it out the bag and get the feedback from Prue and Paul really, really got to me. And it was such a lovely moment. And I think it was great because it was really well appreciated on social media. There was lots of lovely comments and tweets, and, audiences of anything and social media can be quite a negative place at times, but it was so nice to see that she got a lot of support from that one for being brave enough to be out there. And it was Lizzie in a cake. I mean, it was Lizzie in a cake, but she just pulled it out. And I will be honest, that for me was my favourite out of the 5. I thought it was incredible. I love the concept, love the execution, love the colour, the idea. It was brilliant. It was brilliant.
It was so good. I definitely agree. There was an emotional aspect to it because we've all seen that she's been working so hard to get that finesse and that feedback from the judges for all of the weeks. And she's been really, really pushing it. And actually, the bake that I think meant the most to her, she managed to do it on. And I think that was so special. And you don't really hear, well, I guess because I haven't been looking out for it, or I guess noticing, you don't really hear many people. When she started saying, oh, actually, I have ADHD and I have dyslexia and concentration problems or whatever, when they were talking to her about the bake, you don't actually hear people discussing that or even sort of admitting it, I guess, or saying, oh yeah, I actually have ADHD or I struggle with this. You don't hear many people on TV say that, especially in reality TV and people who are just normal members of the public. You might get documentaries or whatever from a celebrity, but actually just to hear someone who we've enjoyed watching and is there in one of the biggest TV shows this country has produced ever, I thought it was amazing to actually hear, her say, I've got ADHD and this is what I'm going to be baking today. I just thought it was a really good thing. And I guess if you suffered from the same sorts of things as Lizzie, how amazing would it be to hear that on TV, right? On a primetime TV show, that someone who is going through the same thing as you and really understands it is out there baking and is doing her best and, is thriving, really.
Yeah, exactly. And, we live in a world and culture where, despite the fact we shouldn't have to seek it, we all seek acceptance. And again, working with children and working with adults who have got ADHD and dyslexia, which can be so hard to tackle. having an example of that on TV where, you know, in front of 9 million people, whatever, you've got somebody like Paul Hollywood, who is a tough critic, saying you've absolutely smashed this, and it's on a bake which, as you say, you know, highlights the things that she has to tackle and overcome. And, you know, we've seen her not her battle with it, because I don't think it's been a battle, you know, she does incredibly well, but she found the finesse hard, and she never really said why. But when she said that in this bake, and it was the bake, as you say, where she aced it, you just think that it was just such a wholesome moment. And you're right, I think it will inspire people who, you know, and dyslexia and ADHD are incredibly common nowadays. You know, it's diagnosed a lot. We know a lot more about it. So to have that was just, yeah, it's fantastic. It's such a good Bake Off moment.
It was so good. Something that will go down, I think, in Bake Off history. Similar to when Nadia talked about having anxiety and things when she won. And she said, oh, I can do everything now. I'm not going to put these barriers in the way. And we all remember that being such an emotional moment. But I think it was also emotional because we were all like, oh, you know, someone on TV is experiencing the same things that people watching it are. I think we'll remember it for that, because it was inspirational. Let's move on to talk about Giuseppe now, because Lizzie did so well and actually reached the finesse and, you know, reached her potential, whereas Giuseppe, he was having a bit of a difficult week. He went with the Black Forest Gatto cake. Come on, why? I don't understand. Why did he have to do that? I know.
Ban the Black Forest Gatto.
Ban it. Ban the kirsch and the cherry. But he did a kirsch cherry jam, had pistachios, puffed rice and chocolate, and a chantilly cream. And he went flour free as well. He added a bit of free from himself. And this is where, as you said earlier, Paul Hollywood was a little bit harsh and said, you know, this isn't your best bake. I'd expect better from you. And it was like gutting, that moment, I thought. Giuseppe, you could see him like, oh, great. Thanks, Paul.
I know, it's so tricky. And, you know, he didn't have a great showstopper last week in Caramel Week as well. And he's one of those that out here in the world of people who are watching it after it's all been filmed, you know, we expect him to be fantastic. And you can tell, I mean, I think that really revealed the cards that he is their winner at the moment. You know, up until this point, he is the one that they are going for. And I just, it was really strange for him to miss the mark again. And I felt quite sorry for him, really. But to be fair, you know, looking at it, it wasn't his best.
Exactly.
You know, and they were saying about the chantilly cream that had been piped up the side, how it covers things up. And, you know, when he got it out and he poured the chocolate over it, I was like, oh my God, that's a mess.
Yeah.
That actually is a mess. I was like, sorry, you know, I'm Chair Baker again. Obviously, I'm qualified to say that.
Yeah.
But yeah,
but that's a mess.
Like, it's a mess. You know, and he's piping cream up it, and I was like, oh. And again, maybe if it hadn't have been against Lizzie's cake and Christelle's cake and Jürgen's slightly wonky cake, then, you know, and Cheeks' great cake, it may have done better, but it just stuck out, which is unusual for Giuseppe. But I love the fact he went brave with trying to go flour free, and he went Black Forest, which is traditional. It's a Maggie, but you know, he tried to put his spin on it, and I like that. Hats off to him. Exactly.
Even though he didn't get the best feedback, I mean, all of the cakes this week were incredible. Amazing. Even Giuseppe's. So, you know, I thought it was an incredibly tough decision for the judges to come up with Star Baker and the person that was going to go. I really wasn't sure who it was going to be at all this week. No. And it was interesting, as you say earlier, that they really had to look at it from what people had done in previous weeks. But I'm not sure if I really agreed with that necessarily, because looking at it, someone who hasn't done so well this week, you know, he did well in the showstopper, but, you know, he didn't do well in the first two challenges, was Jürgen. And he dropped his sausage rolls on the floor, and his macarons didn't work at the beginning. You know, he's the person that had, I think, the most drama this week. And in previous weeks, it's the person that, you know, hasn't done too well and has the drama that goes. But I feel like they got to this week, and I know it's the quarterfinals, so it is based on a lot of the other weeks and what they've seen from the bakers and their sort of potential. But if it was judged on week by week, and they do pride themselves that anyone could go at any time, it's judged week by week. Paul Hollywood even said that on Extra Slice last week. Yeah. I was a bit surprised because I couldn't see Jürgen going, but it felt like they thought, okay, we can't make Jürgen go because he is very good. And he's been excellent, especially a lot higher above than some of the other bakers in the tent still, like Lizzie and Chigs. But Lizzie, her showstopper was so good. I thought, is that going to be enough to save her? Because actually it could be, because she'd done what they'd been asking for such a long time. So I didn't really know where it was going to go, really.
I mean, I'm going to start my response to that with a disclaimer that I am not going to mention the F word, the fix, because I don't think there is a fix with this. But it was just it was a weird moment. And particularly, I think, when we came back just before the showstopper after that break, which of course I'd fast forwarded through.
Yeah.
Still an advocate. For me, it was weird because they do the bit where they sort of catch in after the second challenge. And Paul and Prue said that Chigs and Giuseppe were the top two. In fact, they went Giuseppe first for, Star Baker. Those two were in the running for Star Baker. And they had Lizzie and Christelle at the bottom two, who were, the ones that were in danger. And Jürgen just wasn't mentioned. He was sort of safe in third. And that really surprised me, because I think when you look at those first two bakes, obviously we don't taste them. We see a tiny bit of what's going on in the tent. But I was really shocked that Jürgen wasn't mentioned at all.
Yeah.
And I thought, I don't know, because it's that them watching the showstopper, again, with his cake being a bit wonky and not as beautifully decorated and imaginative as Lizzie's and Christelle's, I was exactly the same as you. I genuinely could not call it. I thought that it would be Chigs for Star Baker, only from the fact that they said it was between Chigs and Giuseppe, and he'd done the better out of the two. But then we've had weeks where somebody does something absolutely fantastic when everyone's sort of been middle of the road, and I wouldn't have been surprised if they gave it to Lizzie or Christelle, because their showstopper was fantastic. Yeah. It was so hard to call, but I was really surprised that Jürgen wasn't at any point mentioned as being in danger. I thought that was very strange. Yeah,
I think it was as if they didn't even need to mention Jürgen, because in their minds there's just no reason that he would go. But
yeah,
we have said a few times that people have saved themselves by doing a really spectacular showstopper, and I think this week Lizzie did a really spectacular showstopper. And to be honest, if we're sticking with those rules, she could have stayed. But then it was, who else are you going to put out? Who else is going to go? Really, are you going to make it Jürgen? Because I guess because he has been so good in the other weeks, would it be unfair? So I don't know. It gets tougher, doesn't it, to judge when you get further along in the whole process. I think it'll be interesting when we get to next week as well to see what they decide. But Chigs, he won Star Baker. We've spoken about how, it was sort of, because he'd done incredibly well with the technical challenge and everything, and his ice cream sandwiches were good, but also it was because other people were having not a great week, so it allowed Chigs to shine again. And I was pleased that he got it, but to be honest, I kind of forgot that he was the one that got it. In my head, I just thought it was Giuseppe, because it's sort of, that's what we have every week. Is it Jürgen, Giuseppe? Sometimes it might be Christelle. But I sort of went, oh yeah, it was Chigs, wasn't it? It wasn't sort of he didn't stand out necessarily to be Star Baker, but he ended up getting Star Baker.
Yeah, I think it was one of those, said it could have really gone to a few people. I couldn't have called it at the end. I think he really deserves it. It's nice that he got one earlier on in the series and he's getting one now at the quarterfinal. And it puts us in a very interesting situation because, and I haven't researched this one, but funny enough, my girlfriend said this when we were watching and we got to the end of the episode, because she said to me that she thinks it's the first time, and I agree with that, it's the first time that we've got to a final four where not only have they all got Star Baker at some point during the series, but also that they are the only four that have got a Star Baker during the series.
Oh, yeah.
Because nobody else has got them. Lizzie was the last person who didn't have a Star Baker, George before that. So we've now got 4 semi-finalists who not only have all got a Star Baker at least once, obviously Crystal's had it once, Chigs and Giuseppe twice, and Jürgen 3 times, but they are the only 4 who have had it as well. And we think that's the only time that's ever happened. So that's an interesting dynamic to put in, I think, going ahead to the semi-final.
Yeah, that is interesting. I didn't really think of it like that. You know, all the people who have had Star Baker, they've ended up in the final, because usually you get a few sort of mavericks that get Star Baker in the middle, and then it's like the next week, oh, well, you've done terribly, you're off. You know, that's happened before. So, yeah, it's interesting. I think Paul Hollywood at the beginning of the entire series said it's been a favourite of his because the standard of baking is very high, and you think, oh, is that just something he's saying as a press thing? But I think now, coming into the semi-final, and the final, I think it's going to be very hard to judge, and I think it is going to be a really difficult one. Next week, we sort of guessed it already, because they usually do this for the semi-final. They do patisserie week, where everything is intricate and small, and, you know, very sort of the posh bakes, I guess. So we're going to be looking forward to that next week. Your favourite bit is the little teaser bit for next week on every episode. So I wasn't sure if there was dramas coming up, or if we had a little look at what any of the bakes were. Usually patisserie, I'm not going to know what any of them are, but they're just going to be small and detailed. That's what we know.
Little dainty things. Now, I've got to admit that the weird thing about the profile this week, I admit I haven't rewatched the preview, which, as you know, usually I watch about 7 times before we do the episode. The weird thing about it, though, is that it didn't really give any idea of drama for once. I came away from it thinking, oh, actually, it just seems quite calm. There wasn't any moment where, you know, like last week, we saw somebody dropping sausage rolls on the floor, and we saw somebody being told by Paul that they hadn't really done their best and they need to try harder. Whereas it was a lot of the typical ones of people standing around looking at ovens going, "Ooh, it's hot." And that was about it. So it really leaves next week open, and despite the fact I sort of have a gut feel of who I think could be final 3, it really could be anyone again. I think it really will come down to what happens next week, because any of the 4 of them could go home.
I know.
They really could.
We've been so sort of vocal saying who we think's going to be in the final 4 or final 3, and I'd been putting Christelle in there, and I know you had too, but this week Chigs, he did so well, so I cannot actually call it. I feel like it's fair to say that Jürgen and Giuseppe, even because looks like it's been slightly engineered that way, are going to be in the final. But then you've got Chigs and Christelle. I have absolutely really now no idea which one is going to be in there. I always thought it was Christelle, but now Chigs with his next Star Baker, I'm not sure.
Well, it's funny because when we predicted our final 4 right back at the beginning, I think I put Maggie and Freya in mine. You did. And when those two then came out, as soon as they came out, I put Chigs and Christelle in. So this is the final 4 that I wanted after, I think it was Freya who left second, I can't remember now. So I'm happy with the final 4, but I can't say my gut feeling, if I'm honest, is that I think it will be Chigs that goes through to the final. Oh, really? I think it will be an all-male final, which controversial. But the last 2 weeks or 2-3 weeks, Christelle has really upped her game. Like, she's come up with some great ideas. That cake from this week, the sort of, you know, terrarium that she had with the sugar dome last week, even though it took 4 attempts, you know, and she only got Star Baker in episode 6 with the pastries. You know, when she did that really nice cottage for her nan. So I don't know. It's my gut feeling is I think that it could be Christelle's week to go. I mean, I'd love it, considering how self-depreciating she's been on social media. If she wins this now, I mean, she needs a BAFTA to go along with it, because she's played that so well. Absolutely. But yeah, I in my heart of hearts, I think it might be Christelle go next week. But at the same time, I don't want her to go. I don't want any of them to go. And it could be any of them going, any of them staying. I just don't know. And this is the first time this has ever happened. You sound like you're in a little bit of an existential crisis over it, really. You're not sure who's going to be... Yeah. You seem distressed. I am. I feel like I'm Jürgen and I've just dropped some sausage rolls on the floor. I know. Yeah. I don't... What do you think? I mean... I think I've been saying Christelle, and I think it's going to be Christelle because it's patisserie, and she's very, very good at the detail. We know that garden she did with the cottage, and then her granddad's sort of cactus terrarium, and then this week the piping, you know, everything. I think that she might be going through just because of the detail and how, you know, how precise she can be. Chigs, he's good with detail too. He did that collar this week and everything. He's great at decoration, but I just think patisserie is really hard, and maybe Chigs as the lockdown baker, even though he's really excelled, it might
be a little bit too much, but he could also completely prove us wrong because he's just absolutely like won every challenge. He's just done it completely fine so far. So that might be really unfair to say. But it's weird, isn't it? Because I still think that the winner is going to be Jürgen or Giuseppe. I don't see it even that third person, even though they might be really good. I don't even think it's going to be them. It is going to be Jürgen or Giuseppe. And I've had my money on Giuseppe from week 1, which is mad.
You have.
You've had your money a bit on Jürgen. He's sort of dwindled a little. So it's going to be a bit of a battle between me and you, I think, as well.
It could be. I think because I mean, I don't know. It's tricky, isn't it? Because those two were so strong from the beginning. And as we've said, what the Bake Off producers and editors are very good at is creating the storyline. They get us to like them all in the first week. We get to know all 12 of them and we follow them through. We know when people are going to leave because all of a sudden they have an episode where you get to see their life story. You know, we don't know that Lizzie didn't talk about her ADHD and dyslexia in the 3rd week and it was just edited out until this week. We don't know that. And I just feel that Giuseppe and Jürgen were really strong from the beginning because, you know, they were great and they were the strongest bakers at the beginning. But at the same time, the other two have really come out. I just had a look back there. You know, 𝗔𝗽𝗃𝗁 came 11th in the first technical. Christelle came 8th. And all of a sudden, we're getting these brilliant bakes. You know, they've both got a star baker at one point. I wonder if the Bake Off producers have played us all at their own game, really, and sort of, you know, if 𝗔𝗃𝗁 or Christelle turned around and won the final, that would be amazing. Like, what a turnaround that would be.
It'd be excellent TV.
I know, particularly as Giuseppe and Jürgen have both had a couple of shaky weeks now towards the end. They started off strong and they've got shakier, whereas the other two started shaky and have got stronger. And they always talk about the J word, the journey. I don't know. I really can't call it. And I'm really excited about that, although I'm also having an existential crisis.
Yeah, I think that's how I feel as well. I think we're going to be sat in a lot of sort of tense atmosphere and we're going to be a bit anxious anytime someone mentions Bake Off, I think, from now on, because we just don't know. I don't know. No. I'm feeling tense over it next week for Patisserie Week. I'm really looking forward to watching it. It's going to be great, I think. I'm going to be sad Lizzie's not there because she has been a great person to have on screen. But yeah, I'm very, very tense now.
Yeah,
I think.
Me too.
Yeah. Well, thanks, JP, for joining me to talk about Free From Week. It's been an interesting week with, you know, baked goods and non-baked goods, but it's been interesting to sort of see who on earth is going to be in that final. And yeah, I just think I'm going to sit sort of in anxiety now for a couple of weeks.
Luckily, we've only got 2 left. I mean, I'm really sad that we're only 2 away from the end, but at the same time, it's probably good for my blood pressure.
Possibly. Anyway, thanks so much for listening, and we'll see you back here next time for Patisserie Week.
Yes!